Good morning, everyone. Admiral Kraft, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here today to discuss my views on globalization and a few areas where this process, looking forward, has implications for the Navy. At the start, I'll note that these are my comments alone, my ideas. I don't represent the views of Maersk Line Limited or my famously fractured industry. I have to say I'm not exactly sure why I offer that. It doesn't give me any immunity from being fired if I say something that irritates my superiors. And I've certainly tested that in the past. But protocol is offered, so there it is. So I think the opportunity to discuss these sorts of things has great value to both of us, the Navy and commercial folks, since in general we have very, very different worldviews. You tend to view the world as an array of threats to be countered, while I tend to view the world as an array of opportunities to be exploited. Excepting a few bad neighborhoods where we are free to exercise caution, we can go about our business without being molested. I am very mindful that the world as I see it does not happen by accident, and I have the luxury of my worldview precisely because you have the responsibility of the worldview you have. But when our worldviews collide, the guys with the big guns tend to win. And so the more you know about what we do, the better off we are. Security for its own sake is meaningless. We need to focus on what it is we're about protecting. After all, if I'm a bodyguard charged with preventing my client from being kidnapped, the way to absolutely guarantee success is to shoot him. Nobody kidnaps dead guys. So the security part works, but the outcome is probably not optimal for the client. So to try and avoid the maritime equivalent to that situation, we take advantage of every opportunity offered to work with our Navy partners to make sure they understand what we do, how we do it, and why. Some are fairly low-tech. We have a shipwriter program, mostly used by the Coast Guard, but open to any DOD, where folks get on board and ride around our ships to get a first-hand look at both underway ops and terminal cargo ops. The complexity of what goes on discharging a few thousand containers, getting them out the gate and on their way within a few hours of discharge, and backloading a few thousand outbound is pretty impressive. And my guess is it's pretty badly underestimated when I hear silly things like the U.S. Congress mandated 100% container scanning requirement as security practice. Absolutely, the maritime equivalent is shooting the client in order to protect them. That single piece of legislation, were it actually to happen, and implementation has been delayed mercifully, could result in an annual deadweight loss to the global economy of about 150 billion euros, according to a European Commission report, or about $200 billion at today's exchange rate, euro not being worth what it once was. That's about 20 times the damage Somali pirates are alleged to do, even at the high end of the estimates of their impact. And no one believes 100% scanning will make the global supply chain more secure. Most believe it will actually degrade overall security. On the other end of technical complexity scale, we are partnered with Naval Research Labs in a program called Radar-M. In this program, some of our ships are fitted with a system that collects radar data and associated AIS and GPS data and transmits it back to the Navy ashore. Navy operators or their computers ashore can then see in real time exactly what we see, where we are when we see it, and what we're seeing. Put that on enough ships, or on ships in the right place, and couple it with the right artificial intelligence, and that builds a pretty robust view of what's going on in places you can't be with your own eyes. The next phase of that program is under preliminary development now, where the existing system will be coupled to a FLIR with a high-end radar, a high-end camera, and some local artificial intelligence that will allow you to get pictures of things that fit a particular profile automatically. A specific ship you're looking for, or a radar target that does not have an associated AIS tag, AIS being remarkably easy to spoof and even easier to just turn off. You can control the cameras yourself and take pictures or movies of whatever interests you. Most of our ships, by the way, are already fitted with camera systems we install on our own, and all will have it in the near future. With this system, we can pan, tilt, zoom cameras on each wing. We have a fixed camera looking aft from the stern, a wide-angle fixed camera looking aft from the foremast, and a few strategically placed cameras in the interior of the ship, which are hidden or designed to look like things like smoke detectors. These cameras constantly stream live video back to a facility in the States and have a 90-day record function. We can log on to a website anytime, call up any ship we're interested in, select whatever camera view we're interested in, and see what's going on in real time. The uses for piracy are obvious. We can provide the necessary login information to you, and troops in a helicopter heading out to a ship can see where exactly the bad guys are and watch what they're doing. But those cameras also have other uses. If something happened 3 weeks ago and we happen to be in the area, for example, we may have been lucky enough to catch whatever it is you're interested in on camera, so we can go back and review what the cameras were seeing. If we're in a particular port and you're interested in, we can, within the limits of local law, point the wing cameras at whatever you want, or let you control them yourselves, a feature we're upgrading to now. So once again, we can give you eyes in places you cannot be yourself. During Arab Spring, for example, we were doing lots of reporting on activity in and around the Suez Canal, since we have at least one ship through there every day. We do lots of stuff in between those ends, and we particularly like exercises. There's a limit on how much we can learn about each other swapping sea stories at cocktail parties, or at least a limit on how much we can believe. The real learning takes place working shoulder to shoulder and making decisions together. We will always do whatever we can to participate in any government war game or tabletop we're invited to, and we run some of our own. Last year we hosted and funded an exercise in which one of our tankers suffered a Cold-style attack off the coast of Yemen. We dispatched operation folks to Bahrain, had a bunch of government partners, Navy, Coast Guard, NCIS, FBI, etc., and our situation room in Norfolk, and activated our networks for contingency response, such as salvage and medical care. One result, for example, is that we developed a very robust understanding of commercial salvage capability and activities in that region. More importantly, it was an opportunity to work alongside the folks we would work with in a real emergency. We'll be gearing up for this year's exercise in the near future and hope we get the same or better participation from our government partners than we had last year. In my opinion, no, we don't do nearly enough of that sort of stuff. One threat I think that is not fully appreciated in the maritime sector is the cyber threat. Our ships, of course, are highly automated. The next time you are underway and passing a 1,300-foot-long post-Panamax container ship loaded with 15,000 containers, or an 11,000-foot-long VLCC loaded with 300,000 tons of crude, remember there are more people standing on your bridge looking at him than he has an entire crew. I would note, by the way, that while most of our ships are unmanned, the ship is unmanned, including the engine room. We do not operate with an unmanned bridge, so rest assured someone is up there looking back at you, usually. So anyway, the first thing a technician does when he gets to the engine room is he plugs in his laptop to the automation system. A laptop we have no idea where else it's been, or what else it's been plugged into, or what it's carrying. Stuxnet comes to mind here. And as folks that have taken advantage of our ship rider program know, container terminals are increasingly automated. While the cranes actually working the ship still have a real person driving, all those gantry cranes roaming around container yards are more often than not computer-controlled robots. The U.S., by the way, is light years behind the most efficient ports in the world in this regard, and also much smaller. The combined LA Long Beach terminals, through which about 43% of all U.S. waterborne containers flow, combined are in the 14 million TEU range per year, which would place them around 8th in global size. The largest Asian container ports, Shanghai, Singapore, and the like, are in 28 to 31 million TEU range per year. One interesting facet about megaports is that they are transshipment ports, meaning the cargo comes in one ship and leaves on another, never passing through the gate and associated security apparatus, with dwell time in the port very short, hours usually. The lifeblood of all this is the smooth, uninterrupted flow of information, without which the flow of physical stuff stops. There is nothing on all those containers you see in that slide, or the 15,000 on the ship you pass underway, to identify who sent them, where they are going, or what's in them, but a number. The speed with which they are supposed to move through the system would surprise you. When a box is offloaded in Prince Rupert on the Canadian West Coast bound for Chicago, it is supposed to be there within 100 hours. A port handling 28 million containers every year does this about 76,000 times a day. And by the way, in that slide, all those containers you see on the right hand, the gantry cranes, on the right hand side of the slide, those are all robots. There's nobody in them. Consistency is important as speed, as containers are now more often than not carrying components headed for factory assembly lines in just-in-time inventory management system. What we call cargo, others call inventory in transit, and when it's late, factories shut down. If you want to shut down a port, a computer you can buy at Walmart and a connection to the internet is a heck of a lot more effective than a dirty bomb in a box. Neither one of them would be nearly as effective at shutting down a big port nut or chaos, though, as 100% container scanning. We are in the process of introducing a service to our reefer.
So you don't like that, right?
No, sir. I'm not a big fan of that. We are in the process of introducing a service to our reefer container customers where each reefer box is outfitted to gather information about the inside of the environment inside of the container, and using something resembling a cell phone, transmit this information to a central location on the ship, which has been outfitted to act something like a cell phone tower. The information is then sent via satellite to a facility ashore. Reefer customers can log into a website, log onto their own specific reefer container, view in real time what the conditions are inside the box, and manipulate the settings, control the temperature, for example, on their specific box anytime they want. There are weaknesses in this system, as enterprising seamen quickly demonstrated by getting the system to recognize their personal cell phones, so they were able to make unlimited cell phone calls anywhere in the world off our reefer monitoring system. So when the possibility of connecting the system to the ship's automation system was raised so that we could monitor what the ship itself was doing, we decided not to allow that. Clearly, the potential exists within the existing configuration for someone to hack into the system and take control of an individual reefer box. But given that the motivation for sabotaging a box of bananas seemed wanting, I'm not personally too worried about that. But if the system is connected to the ship's automation system, a suitably skilled hacker could conceivably remotely take control of the ship, and I worry a lot about that. I know, too, that not all cyber threats come from bad guys, as a recent Light Squared event showed us. Light Squared was a private project which was given preliminary FCC approval to bring wholesale 4G wireless broadband integrated with satellite coverage across the U.S. The problem is that Light Squared transmissions would have blinded GPS receivers. The impacts on both marine aviation and terrestrial navigation are obvious, but GPS is now also used more for timing signals than anything, meaning automation systems and computer networks are also at risk. We are not completely certain the engines on our ships will work if GPS is down. Without GPS, things like the electricity grid, phones, and financial systems also will not work properly, if at all. Common sense did eventually prevail in this case, but it was closer than it should have been to be in a pretty big mess. This is a clear reminder that we don't need to just worry about what bad guys might do. Bad policy is equally or sometimes more dangerous because it's easier to implement, more likely to happen, and often you just don't see it coming. So let's shift and talk a little bit about what we're protecting with some crystal ball gazing. I find it almost obligatory to first note that the overused term 90% of world trade moves by water is wrong. Roughly 20% of world trade is in services, including things like telecommunications and financial services, which tends to move over fiber optics. The cyber issue again raises its head. As we'll discuss in a few moments, that percentage is likely to grow much larger in the not-too-distant future. The U.S. is also the world's largest exporter of services, by the way. But really, about 90% of world trade in physical stuff is measured by volume moves by water. As measured by value, it's more in the 65% range. Given the difference in value between volume versus value, given the difference in that measurement, it's clear an awful lot of high-value stuff moves by means other than water, and that's air. Air cargo logistics systems are faster, more tightly integrated than the ocean version, and have different critical nodes, places like Anchorage, Memphis, or Louisville. That system moves stuff like auto parts, electronics, and pharmaceuticals. Since the U.S. has largely exited the business of making drugs here, for example, a significant disruption in the air cargo system will now rapidly become a healthcare crisis. So it's important to remember when thinking about global supply chains that the air component is every bit as important as the ocean component. The nature of trade now is also vastly different than not very long ago, making the notion of interdependent economies obsolete. We now have interdependent production processes across economies, making the made in label also obsolete. All a made in label really tells you now is where the last place was that touched a particular good before it was ready for the end user. It certainly does not tell you where something was actually made, with that no longer being a single location.